Hi, everyone. So one more event celebrating our 10th anniversary of LAC, Laboratory of Academic Literacy, here at the University of São Paulo, Brazil. And I'm very glad to introduce two professors in this event. And this event is a little bit different from what we have been having because it's a book launch, but done in a very different way, especially I think for us in Brazil, because we're going to portray voices of the tutors. So without further ado, because you understand as they will explain, and I don't want to say a lot, I want really introduce very gladly Professor Mark Orsini and Loren Kleinman. They are the editors of the book that we are launching today, okay, here in Brazil. Max Orsini is a poet, critical essayist, teacher, and singer-songwriter from Brooklyn, New York. He received a BA in English, Creative Writing, and Gender Studies from Washington College in 2003, and his MA in English from Drew University in 2005, and most recently a doctorate in Arts and Letters from Drew University 2016. For his literary dissertation, he received both the Mark of Academic Distinction and the Robert Chapman Award for Creative Thought and Excellence in Prose Style from the Casperson School of Graduate Studies. In 2018, Max's dissertation, The Buddhist Beats Poetics of Diane de Prima and Lenore Candel, will be published by the Authority on Beat Generation Studies, Beaton Press. Max teaches courses in writing composition, ESL writing, literature, pop culture, and poetics at Drew University. Loren Kleinman is a writer at J. Frog. She has an MA in creative and critical writing from the University of Sussex, United Kingdom. Loren Kleinman was also the former director of the University Writing Center at Drew University, US. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be here, organizing, hosting this event as part of our celebration. I also publicly would like to thank Ola Tolson, which is our tutor and PhD student here in our program in English Studies at the University of São Paulo, Department of Modern Languages. The idea of this event was her initial idea, and she organized most of the event, doing a great job because we're involving people from different parts of the world. Thank you very much again, and welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay. So thank you so much for having us here and, for the opportunity to include so many of these beautiful essays. Max and I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about where we kind of how this book transpired, where the ideas came from, and kind of what our goals of this book were. So kind of to back up a little bit, we kind of started thinking about this project as we started to develop these writing center meetups for graduate students, which really focused on building community, helping students kind of achieve authority of voice, but really a space where people can talk about their writing in a safe space that wasn't high stakes, really. And we kind of really thought about, well, what if we kind of took this idea of these writing groups and all of this wonderful community building and all of this beautiful material and confidence and all of this great stuff that's coming out of these groups, and maybe turn it into a book where we can kind of collect essays from the student writing tutor community to kind of talk about the things that matter to them most. And what kind of developed through this call was a really fascinating look at community, the importance of community, the diversity of experiences by writing centered, by country and writing center, and also the interactions between students and tutors. So our goal was really to bring all of these voices together and really kind of fill this gap in a lot of the literature where there's a heavy focus on theory and applying theory to practice, but it's not very often that we get an opportunity to really hear a very raw version of what goes on behind the theory, what goes on behind the practice. After everybody kind of walks away. So this is a really important piece for us to include and to introduce to the Writing Center community. Max, would you like to add anything?
That's a great synopsis. I totally concur. I would just even just add, as you're talking, I was thinking that, and as 2017, 18, and 19 shifted to 2020 in the pandemic, we thought this would be, a rife and valuable moment for people to use the space of distance to think about and reflect upon what it is community means to them when, in fact, community is not there in the same way that it was. So, having these stories, these international narratives about writing centers and what they do for people, really allowed us to take some time during the pandemic to really think about what writing centers are offering for people.
So I guess, without further ado, we'll get into kind of the meat of our reading. And I'm going to introduce the first reader, who's also the organizer of the event, Lou Watson, from the Laboratory of Academic Literacy at the University of Sao Paulo. She wrote a really beautiful essay about the community or the communal nature of writing centers, and really like the intersections between supporting writers in her center, and kind of, parenting in the era of the pandemic at home, which I felt really speaks to kind of the variety, like the things that we don't normally think about that tutors are facing, that they're not just, working in centers, but they're also kind of managing the world around them. And how does that intersect with the work that they do in the writing center? So without further ado, I'm going to let Lou Watson talk about her beautiful essay, and we have some questions that we can think about, as she works through her points.
Thank you very much, Loren. Hi, everyone. The title of my essay is The Laboratory of Academic Literacy, LAC, a Community of Support in the COVID-19 Pandemic Era. I'm just going to read some excerpts from my work, and I hope you pay attention and also think about it so you can ask questions as well as respond to certain questions that will be asked. The streets are quiet and empty, and the music of birds has replaced the hustle and bustle of people driving to work. Within the twinkle of an eye, our priorities has changed from a quest to earn a living to the need to adjust to the world's new realities. We find ourselves striving to maintain a high level of hygiene by washing hands, sanitizing ourselves and our environment, as well as using face masks. All this has been done in a bid to protect ourselves from a fierce virus that is terrorizing humans and changing the trajectories of our lives. My life is not spared from this sudden change of reality, as a return to the life I was used to does not appear to be in sight. At the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, I felt helpless, stranded, anxious. I had no control over the events happening around me. However, I continued to live through these uncertain times. Gleams of hope have begun to appear. This hope is founded on the availability of support systems that come from communities in which an individual belongs. There is an African adage that says, "Eniyan ni aṣọ ìbora mi," which means human beings provide a more protective covering than clothes will ever provide. In my case, the Laboratory of Academic Literacy, which offers workshops, tutoring, and language support, housed at the University of Sao Paulo, has been providing me with that covering needed during this period. For example, I am currently at the writing phase of my research, and the pandemic has placed me in a very delicate situation by ripping me away from the physical support I previously relied on. Consequently, I had to count on the wealth of knowledge of other tutors. This support was mostly realized using virtual meetings and discussions to comply with the physical distancing measures of the pandemic. Navigating through this, I find myself relying on LAC, which was quick to pivot its activities to the global realities. This pivot maintained the original comforts of LAC, like being receptive and cordial, thus making it possible for users to have confidence in its functionalities. Even more so, LAC fosters community amongst its users, including tutors and tutees, emphasizing mutual support and on-time assistance for students. As a student, LAC welcomed me and allowed me to present my writing vulnerabilities without the fear of being judged. As a tutor, the interaction I had with my tutees helped me understand the impact the pandemic was having on people. The stories we shared served as a means of encouragement to each other, while at the same time creating a positive learning environment where no one felt alone. Nesting the laboratory as a means of survival, I value being part of LAC now more than ever before. Being a tutor at LAC never felt more impactful as it did during the pandemic. I had to adapt my schedules to fit the schedules of my tutees. I had to find new ways of passing information across to my tutees due to the absence of physical interaction. I often took to YouTube, podcasts, webinars, and online materials to support my sessions. Providing these resources meant that tutees had the opportunity to review concepts and ideas after tutoring was over. Adapting to these new realities has also provided me with flexibility as it did for my tutees. The COVID-19 pandemic brought about new realities, and the relevance of belonging to communities has come to the fore. In getting the required help with my academic writing challenges, LAC has been providing this. Being a tutor, I have received both academic and personal support. These include ensuring constant learning and writing improvement through webinars and workshops, socialization and mental health support, and collaborative learning. Attendance and participation in workshops and conferences, which I ordinarily might not have been able to attend, were made possible through online platforms. Similarly, as a tutor in the laboratory, I have become more knowledgeable about several online platforms that enable me to carry out as well as receive tutoring. The all-inclusiveness of the writing laboratory is very conspicuous and indisputable in this pandemic. Although the challenges encountered from the COVID-19 pandemic will continue to be felt long after the severity of the virus subsides, it is important that we continue to put into use all the lessons learned in our future endeavors. We should also take it as a responsibility when life returns to normal to continue to render acts of kindness and support which have brought communities together in the pandemic. Thank you so much. That was just a piece from my chapter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will Watson. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
So I guess we can go into a little discussion. We presented 2 questions here. We left them up while Will Watson was reading, so you can kind of gain, take some mental notes or take physical notes about her essay. So I suppose if we can think about the first question, Helchoson's essay includes an old African adage. Tolson, you say it much better than me, which means human beings provide a more protective covering than clothes will ever provide. Discuss how this adage about protection informs or can inform your own tutoring practice. So I don't know if we want to start with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's anyone who wants to comment on that and put anything into the chat about anything that maybe they've noticed about the way that their laboratory or writing center or learning center can provide covering or has provided covering for people, not only during the pandemic, but also more generally. Protective covering.
I don't know if, Tosin, if you want to perhaps get us started or elaborate a little bit more about, sort of how this adage connects to or intersects with our tutoring practice.
Well, basically, I think when people think about the concept of writing centers, what they think about is a place where you go to correct your text, just to correct your text. People don't take into perspective the fact that writing centers offer more than just correcting of text. Writing centers plays different roles in our lives. It builds confidence in us, it builds community. And I think for everyone, we all realized during the pandemic that the fact that we see people every day, we communicate with people every day should not be taken for granted, because the pandemic brought about a separation and we realized how valuable it is to have people in our lives that we can actually call on at any time, regardless of our situation. And that's what the Writing Center did for me personally, because I realized that I was in a very critical stage of my master's at that time. I needed to qualify. And it was just a sudden shock. It took me by surprise. And the support from my writing center, the Laboratory of Academic Literacy, was enormous, because aside helping ourselves to improve, we found ourselves cheering each other up, you know, even in the critical situation the world was facing. We had reasons to put a smile on each other's face, as well as transcend this also to our tutees, because a happy tutor brings about happy tutees. So generally, for me, the pandemic proved that every institution requires a writing center. Because, for example, in Brazil, we are all going through this publish or perish situation where we need to write and write and write and write. And how do you do this in an environment? You thrive more when you're in an environment that there is love. You have a feeling of community, because as humans we have the urge and the need for connectivity. So that's something writing centers provide for us. So I think being a tutor, being a tutee, gives you this relationship. The writing center brings this bond that gives you the motivation to keep thriving regardless of the situation you find yourself. So for me, this influences our tutoring practice, because like I said, a happy tutor, then we have a happy tutee.
I would like to say something, but you were just raising my hand.
Sure.
I think what Tosin says reflects a lot. We have been working for 10 years. Now we are going to our 11th year of work, foundation, 2011. And we have been through many things. But there was always a principle. Me and my other partner, Eliane Lousada, she takes care of French and Portuguese as first language. Always this Vygotskian principle, and I think Tosin's essay reflects that. She's put in words what somehow we have been developing. Not that it's ready. We've been constructing this community based on cooperation and mediation and support. Each person has something to offer and to help. It's not only me, because I'm the advisor, the general coordinator, or the researcher, and they are advisors as well. Because our tutors most of them are graduate students, masters or PhD students, most. Because of the work we do. We do have some undergrads, and then they usually go to the graduate school. So this reflects this building community that we have been doing before the pandemic. Maybe that's why it was less difficult. I wouldn't say it would be easy. And also the support, I think, from the writing community, because when she talks about these workshops, these things, because people started giving these free stuff online, and I'm in many lists, and so I forwarded to them, and one would go, and we would share, or some people would take, because people, we still had to work from home. So and it was a good opportunity also for more development. more education in terms of writing and tutoring because of the opportunity these beautiful places provided, universities, writing centers, podcasts, and other institutions that provided services free and free knowledge transfer, let's say, and also the emotional aspect which we tried. But I think it's a result we managed because we have been doing that for before, establishing this based on Vygotsky principles. That's what I'd like to say.
I think that's really fantastic. I think we probably have time for one more question from Daniela Carvello. She's asking, can you talk more about the types of support that this community has offered you, how tutoring sessions provided you with emotional or even psychological support?
Well, thank you very much for that question. For me, it was everything during the pandemic. LAC was everything. And I think if there is something the world is missing nowadays is empathy, right? And this, our writing center reflects a lot because we are all in the hustle and bustle of the world, particularly in the university community, where we are always under pressure. We are always under pressure to produce. We are always under pressure to show what we are doing, to show what we are researching, to show the results of our activities. And for me, having a community to sit with me, to help me research with my work, to go through my writing, my essays, my text, my publications was everything. And more so, the pandemic on its own was already psychologically draining, right? So having this community, having people I could rely on, having a village cheering me up and supporting me, but made the whole difference in the pandemic. So I think the characteristics reflected in LAC should be something every writing center should pay attention to, not just to the clientele, but also to tutors, because tutors needs to be stable. And we also need to teach the academic world what it means to be collaboratively working, what it means to support each other. And that's one of the major characteristics I, as a tutor, I, as a person, I, as an individual, has experienced with LAC. So when this happens, emotionally, psychologically, socially, I'm balanced. So for me, that's how I can respond to that question.
Thank you, Lila Watson, and thank you, Daniela, for that really wonderful question. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lila Watson, for sharing your powerful essay about the importance of community in writing centers, especially in times that are very uncertain, like we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. So I guess we should move on to the next reader. I'm going to introduce Melissa Pavlik. Melissa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being here. We appreciate it so much. And just to give you, I want to give you an introduction, but I also wanted to publicly, thank you and acknowledge all of the coordination that you did with this particular piece, and student Benny Rios. Melissa Pavlik is the Writing Center Director and Associate Professor of English at North Park University. And she works with the restoration. I don't want to butcher it, but with the North Park Theological Seminary School of Restorative Arts, Statesville Correctional Center in Crestville, Illinois. And one of her students, Benny Rios, wrote a really beautiful and powerful piece about restoration with unlikely alliances reinforced in prison writing centers. So I'm going to let Melissa introduce Benny and give you a little bit of background and we can take it away. Thanks, Melissa.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. It's nice to see you and to see Max and to meet you virtually. And thank you, everyone, for having me today. I actually just had a chance. I'm in Springfield, Illinois right now for a conference on higher education in prison. So I was able, Benny presented virtually there, so able to touch base with him and just check on things. So Benny Rios also sends his greetings. So Benny Rios is, at the time that he wrote this essay, he was a graduate student in an MA in Restorative Justice Christian Ministry program. He graduated last June, so now he has his master's degree. He's still incarcerated at Stateville Correctional Center, but he has a job assignment as a teaching fellow. So he's teaching peers at the prison, and he's part of a program where we're actually piloting some of our students with master's degrees on the inside, teaching via Zoom as teaching fellows in our undergraduate composition classes on our Chicago campus. So that's a little bit about Benny. He's also probably the reason that North Park University was able to start a writing center in a carceral setting, because the first day that I met Benny, I came in just to do a workshop. The director of his program at the time was asking just for some writing support, because all of the students that are in this graduate degree program, it's an accredited program, but they don't have to necessarily have a bachelor's degree. So some of them, have non-traditional educational pathways and maybe just got their GED, and now they have to write these 3,000 word essays, on biblical studies or theology or conflict transformation by hand on paper. So when I did the first workshop, I sat down with Benny to look at one of his papers, and he said, I don't really need that much help on my paper, but, wouldn't it be great if we had tutors here on the inside that were tutoring other students? And I said, that's interesting, because my job on the outside is to train tutors. I teach an undergraduate tutor training class. And that was a November meeting. And by January, we were teaching the tutor training class to Benny and 14 of his peers at the Correctional Center. So he's really been inspirational for our writing center on the inside and the outside. I have a video of Benny reading his piece. Can I present that, or if I go to present and it does run 10 minutes. Is it okay to watch the whole thing, or should we? Yeah, Max is okay. Great. Well, I will see if I can give you Benny then. So hopefully this will work. I'll share my screen. And I'll also have to share audio. So let me follow those steps. I'm not sure if I am able to share audio. I don't know if maybe one of the hosts could share their screen and share the YouTube link. It says I have to send a request to share audio.
There it is.
There it is.
And invited me to read some of my essays. My name is Benny Rios from Kleinman. I'm a man of faith, and I recently graduated from North Park Theological Seminary with an MA in Christian Ministry and Restorative Arts. Currently, I'm a teaching fellow with North Park, a writing advisor, a writer, a student earning a BA with a depth area in conflict transformation and transformative practices with University Without Walls through Northeastern Illinois University. My writing center has not only provided a space for me to do research, tutor students, and become a better writer, it has also provided a space for me to practice ministry through fellowship with our community. Post-grad, I continue to provide writing assistance to other students and make myself available at whatever capacity the writing center may need me. For now, I will be writing, I will be reading a few excerpts from my essay, Restoration with Unlikely Alliances Reinforced in a Prison Writing Center. In the eyes of society, my new identity became inmate, murderer, offender, rendering my voice muted. Through higher education and prison, our newly formed writing center, I was not only able to explore my own voice, identity, imagination, aspiration, and understanding of the world, but I was also able to restore and transform those things about myself and my credibility. This program, along with other academic programs, has provided incarcerated students with a platform surrounded with a state-of-the-art sound system that has amplified our voices in a way that helps restore our credibility and our humanity. For me, one of the ways this was possible was through the assistance and encouragement from various educators who helped get my writings published. After reading The Re-Education of Nisha Ann Green, a close look at the damaging effects of a standard approach, the benefit of code meshing, and the roles allies play in this work, I was intrigued by how Green broke down the complexities of identity. I was also intrigued by the role our allies play in helping shape and maintain our identity. In a lesson she taught to some of her students, she asked them to draw a circle with the word me in the center. Then she instructed them to draw overlapping circles around the center circle that included representations of the discourse community that they belong to. Finally, she asked them to create one more set of branches that would explain the significance of their discourse community to who they are as individuals. What she did next shocked the students. She went around Xing some of the overlapping circles that contain information about themselves and their communities. The students felt as if parts of their identities were eliminated. That is exactly what happens when one goes to prison. The only difference is that the criminal justice system crosses out everything, including primary circle with the word me in it, and only leaves the overlapping circle that identifies you as a condemned inmate, criminal, monster, outcast, etc. We are left with identity traits imposed on us by the state, which effectively dehumanizes us in the eyes of society. The encouragement that we get from our writing centers, students, educators, friends, and family continue to write helps us allow for our voices to be heard. Our unlikely alliances with educators and students from various universities have given us the opportunity to demonstrate our humanity and our true identities. Once again, I'm reminded of Dale's words when she stated that we are more than the different labels used to describe ourselves. Our true identities consist of being fathers, brothers, sons, uncles, role models, artists, writers, restorative agents, Christians, Muslims, and the list goes on. We all have one commonality. We are all human. Writing centers, ours, encourage us to write on, as our Professor Melissa Pavlik affectionately signs off within each of her correspondences to us. Our other professors often ask us, what does that look like? In reference to ideas such as dismantling and creating a new justice system. Such comments encourage and motivate me to expand my imagination. They cause me to assess, analyze, and picture creative solutions to various issues such as violence prevention, mass incarceration, and racism on a deeper level. As my imagination breaches the limits that I had previously set within my own mind, as a result of systemic injustices, lack of resources, and believing that it was possible to change my circumstances, excuse me, and believing that it was impossible to change my circumstances, I find myself realizing that my aspirations are continually growing. For instance, before I was introduced to the concept of a writing center, I had never aspired to become a writer. Even though I was already a published writer, before I took the Writing Center tutor writing class, I never referred to myself as a writer. However, because of the Writing Center and my role as a writing advisor, I now identify myself as a writer, and I aspire to write a book one day. In exploration of my aspirations, combined with my studies in restorative practices, I find myself aspiring to be a restorative agent of change as well. I want to use the restorative practices that I've learned to help people in their healing from traumatic experiences incurred to them by violence, mental illness, injustices, systemic racism, etc. For example, when North Park began to offer classes here at Stateville back in 2015, they came here with a strong sense of community, the beloved community influenced by Martin Luther King, to be precise. This sense of community not only united unlikely allies, but it also made accomplices out of these unlikely allies in our mission to unite people from all walks of life for the purposes of healing and growth, among other things. The merging of educators and inside and outside students created an environment in Stateville where some prisoners and outside guests co-learn and co-teach with each other, which led to confronting our traumas and to the process of healing. While prisoners are extremely limited on how much we can contribute with regard to using restorative practices to help heal our communities, I find that writing is a powerful way to contribute. Beth E. Ritchie, author of Arrested Justice, mentioned that there is healing in sharing stories because they give voice to pain. By sharing our stories, we can contribute to healing for the writers and the readers. North Park, our writing center, and other allies and accomplices have all played a major role in helping with bringing my aspiration to becoming a restorative agent of change that leads to healing, of change that leads to healing into fruition. And with that, I would like to leave you with the question. Our alliances and community are one of the themes of our writing center. In what ways could your writing center build on community and unlikely alliances with incarcerated people and or others from marginalized communities? Thank you for letting me share this time with you, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking time to read my essay.
That was such a beautiful reading. It honestly felt like Benny was right in the room with us. So thank you so much, Melissa, for coordinating that. I'm wondering if anybody can speak to Benny's question about incorporating or building on unlikely alliances in the writing center. One of the things that I'll say, I was kind of writing down some, even though we've looked at the essays hundreds of times, it's always different when somebody's reading it. And one of the things that stuck out to me that I could 100% identify with was when he said, before that he knew of a writing center, he never thought of himself as a writer. And I could say that I've definitely had that experience of just coming into contact with the writing center on campus when I was an undergraduate student, which totally changed my idea and thinking of myself as a writer, the kind of writer that I am, voice. So it's really interesting that regardless of where we're at in our lives and our journeys,
Yeah.
that's a really powerful comment that really identifies or unites all of us. That I'm sure many of us have had that experience of not thinking of ourselves as writers, and then going to a writing center and having a wonderful experience with the tutors, with the staff, and coming out thinking and having the confidence that, yes, I am a writer. So I'm not sure if Melissa, if you want to speak to this, or Max, or Maria, what your thoughts are, if there are any comments or questions from the audience.
Well, I can say one thing to that, which is I completely agree with you and Benny. And we often operate under the assumption somehow, me and everyone else, that we arrive at places realized, that we are somehow fully realized people. That turns out to not really be the case. The reason that writing centers, spaces, places, contexts, frameworks, buildings all exist is they're frames to help us frame our life, to figure out who we are, right? There's a good quote by William Stafford, the poet and writer. And to paraphrase, he basically says that a writer is not so much someone who has a built up list of ideas, or all these, he says a reservoir or a body of water of ideas before he gets to the page. A writer is somebody who writes to figure out what it is they have to say, and what it is, therefore, who it is, therefore they might be. So when I hear this, and I picked up on that too, that was very powerful, Loren, and I picked up on the phrase that Benny used, expanding imagination. And it seems to me that also writing centers are spaces where imagination is expanded, because how can we imagine others' experiences if we don't have the time and space to do such a thing? And in closing off of my little remark here, I'll say one more quote from the poet Diane de Prima, who said in big capital letters multiple times on the page, "The only war that matters is the war against the imagination." And I think our book is a testament that that our writing centers can be protective coverings for imagination. I think it's a powerful piece that Benny read, really powerful. Did you, Marie and Melissa, want to add some things about Benny's piece?
Yes, when I read, can I go, or do you want to go first, Melissa?
Go ahead.
I think yes, it's very powerful, and it's, first of all, I never had the connection of writing center in incarceration environments. That's the first thing that caught my attention. I said, "Wow." I really didn't see the connection, but with Benny essay, that was it was crystal clear. And one thing again, I think it shows, going back to Vygotsky, it shows how, I think, of course, we don't have details, and it's not supposed to be an academic piece. So through the report, you see that there were a lot of actions, or some actions from Elisa, from her institution, and then the institution where he is in now, and this movement, some of people. So I think I see zones of proximal development in which actually we don't know how exactly they happen, but we can imagine, because we all know the work of writing centers and writing tutors, and how this really transformed him. It is personal development in the very Vygotskian way. Not only because of the voice of reframing identity, imagining and really doing different things and changing his life. So the only word, the first word, or being very academic, keyword from the essay, which is, it's not the point, but just joking here, is Vygotsky and writing as a very powerful transformational resource tool, to use a word. And this is, I think, what we have. Writing centers are, I think, are very aware of that, even if they don't associate with Vygotsky or necessarily with ZDP. But I think that's what we do too. But and it's a perfect example, I mean, concrete one, and how through writing, not only writing, but many actions and steps from the institution, from himself, that promoted his change. So congratulations to Benny, to the organizers, to Melissa, to the institutions, to maybe people who also participated and are not here, but were part of this beautiful process.
Yeah, thank you. These are great comments. I'm writing them down, so I'll make sure to get them to Benny next week when I see him. And to comment a little bit on the part that he writes when he writes about not seeing himself as a writer, just from the perspective of working with students on the inside. I know just from how much names can matter in a place like a carceral setting where you're not usually referred to by name, like you're given a number, you're referred to by wherever your house, like the cell house number, maybe your last name. And also, I think becoming a tutor and having that opportunity to have movement in the education building, it lends to socialization that over time has, I hope, led to some kinds of transformation. So I know that Benny and some of his peers that became writing advisors, we did have to kind of imagine them as writing advisors, and imagine even in a space where one of the first topics of discussion that we had in the tutor training class was about an article by, I think, a scholar, Peter Carino, who talked about the 3 C's of writing center work, or a writing center, and everybody wanted to know, what are those 3 C's? And I messed up. I said, I think it's coffee and cookies and conversation. I said, at least we have the conversation, everybody. And they were like, no, go look at that article again. I'm like, all right, it's couches, cookies, and coffee. So, we started with none of that. And if there's nobody here from Department of Corrections, I can say we sometimes have the coffee, but we don't have the other 2 things. It's just, we had to imagine that, so even now that we're in the school building, it's like, step into my office. Or, Benny, that day, it was pretty loud when he was making the recording because it's a study hall day. There's just a lot of activity going on, a lot of movement. And so he kind of had to kick everybody out of that corner of the space. There were other students actually working in that same classroom. And he said, quiet, this is my studio. So yeah, I think that ability to have a name and to have a role, and to, you imagine it first and you live into it, and then you see what it becomes, has been very much the process these past 5 years of working in that carceral setting, and learning from one another, the people that come from, the volunteers from the outside, and then the students and the staff also from the inside, who, even like our staff now, they're calling, Benny, the professor. So if we have trouble getting in, sometimes because of movement patterns, if we don't have an escort, we could be an hour and a half late to a 3-hour class. And now the officer in the school building says, I knew it was fine because, Professor Rios is here. And we're like, yes. But it starts maybe with in writing centers when, I tell my students on the inside and outside, you are a writer because you're writing right now. But when we do journals or reflective writing about the process, I know that many of my first year students in composition classes do not identify as a writer. And that can be a barrier, I think, in terms of their education moving forward.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Melissa, for coordinating this and for including Benny in this project. His essay, like I said, we've read it so many times that it's still so powerful. So thank you. We're going to move on to our next reader. Timoteo, are you there? Yay, hi. So I wanted to introduce Timoteo. He's one of the first peer tutors at, I don't want to mispronounce it, Hagazan University. There you go, University Writing Center in Lebanon. And what was so fascinating to both Max and I when we received his submission was that he was one of the first writing tutors that they've ever had, which is incredibly fascinating on so many levels because there's really nothing to go on. So there's this whole idea of, how do you create a community of writers that don't exist yet? Um, so I wanted to have Tim and Teo read today to talk about that journey of becoming a peer tutor, of working in the Writing Center and kind of developing this community from the ground up, and what that was like for him and what was the result of that. So Tim and Teo, without any further ado, I'm gonna leave it to you to take us on that journey.
Thank you, Loren. So I'll be reading from sections of my essay that will attempt to answer this question. So, there and right back, building confidence through tutoring. Make your way up the 5th floor of a building with walls and balconies, so traditional to local Lebanese flavors that it has been labeled heritage. Some years ago, a student would find a table strewn with Tupperware and faculty members frowning due to the intrusion to their private bubbles. Today, a student can enter this room and turn left to find a writing center. I am the first peer tutor at Higazian University Writing Center in Lebanon has ever had. From its starting point in fall of 2018, I was blessed to be part of the team. Now, as I reflect on the years the Writing Center has been operating, I realize how much it defined my character and position in the Higazian community. My journey as a peer tutor has led me to be confident about my tutoring skills, has taught me to be dedicated to my responsibilities, and has allowed me to be connected and respected in my community. And as such, I divided my essay into 3 sections of different time periods in which I try to portray that. So the first is December 2018. I'll give you a section of that. G's face is very serene, deftly hiding the stress we are all feeling with final exams approaching and important projects chiming their deadlines. I motion her to sit before a computer that is not being used. I quietly wish the mock session Miss Anita and I have been planning happened the week before, or that I were a tag that could show more explicitly I am still riding with training wheels. The student just looks at me with a smile, expectantly and oblivious to my internal doubts. So, what are you working on? I ask. Miss Anita looks at me from her computer at the other side of the table, her eyes beaming. The student, no duty, takes out her laptop and reveals a Word document on the screen. The content is comforting: English 201, fallacies, and research papers. I ask her what she wants to discuss about the paper, and she immediately scrolls through the comments and the words underlined in red. I know she would like to express herself in Armenian, since that is her native language, as well as that of many of her friends in the university. But we must make do with my English tinged with a Brazilian accent. So I'll move to November 2019. I have a conversation with someone who stepped inside the center. This is the staff lounge. You are more than welcome to eat inside the writing center, but we've been asked to keep students outside the lounge, and this falls under my responsibility. The student has the tuti has a poker face on. For a moment, it seems that he will mock me for sounding so serious, but then he breaks into a friendly smile. Why didn't you tell me before? I even used the microwave and all. My muscles immediately relax, and I let out a relieving sigh. By then, he has already finished eating. So he goes back inside, switches on the computer, and opens YouTube to show me a video. At other times, we sat like that in the same chairs as tutor and tutee, but now we are just 2 university students relaxing in a comfortable space. That is, relaxing without keeping my guard down, for I am still on duty. The words I told A felt strange. Much like a boy dressed in a suit, I had to stop and stare at the mirror for a while to let the identity and responsibilities sink in. With time, they became very natural. I would put on my key necklace, walk through the doors of the center, and anyone who saw me would know that a peer tutor was on duty. And lastly, I turn to March 2020. It is hard to believe that knowing the ABCs of essay writing and showing them with some tact was enough to help a classmate's writing needs in the context of an online session during the pandemic. Using the peer tutor ingredients of inductive questioning and prioritizing higher order concerns helped me lace my ties to the community again. There was also an added layer of respect since the literature professor who had assigned the tutti was so happy with the outcomes of the session that he mentioned it a dozen other times in our online classes. And I reflect at the end when I wrote the essay in June 2021. My hope today is that peer tutors to come will realize how their service indeed can improve the level of writing of their universities, and that it can also refine them with character and belonging in the community despite the challenges of our days.
Just move back. Sorry about that. Thank you so much to Mateo. That was really beautiful. That the last part that you read where you talk about your hope for peer tutors as they'll come to realize their service can indeed improve the level of writing. I think that's something that so many tutors struggle with too, is that what I'm doing of benefit? Is what I'm doing contributing? How do I know that I'm contributing? On what level do I know? And I always think for me, it's not always about the grade, because the grade is yes, it's a part of it, but it's also really helping the whole person, because I think when you start college or you start any new endeavor, you don't know what kind of impact that you're making, or why you're there, or is my voice going to make a difference? And I think both the tutor and the tutee often go through that struggle or that journey together. And I think that's you do a beautiful job of showing that through this really concrete timeline, and kind of what that interaction between you and the students are, and how that ultimately, even those little shuffling around, or those missteps, or the trips, or all of these things, that they really become a part of this development of a community at the university. So I thought maybe we can talk a little bit about that particular section that Timoteo wrote about that hope, and especially how this notion of character and belonging might resonate with you and the work that you do in the center.
So should I address the question?
Sure. If Mariella or Max would like to also add to it, but yeah, sure, Timoteo.
So I think just in terms of confidence, or some of the issues that tutors in training would face, there's a lot that comes with the practice and the realization of what writing is, and was very encouraged by other pieces like Benny's, because it shows that the writing center goes a lot beyond just walls and beyond just that session and some conversation and a paper and the grade. And there is a construction of identity as well. There is a construction of culture. As I've shared, I was hesitant because that first UT I had spoke a different language, and English is not my first language either. So there will always be barriers, and just acknowledging that those barriers exist and acknowledging that the session and the work that the tutor is putting in is a lot more than the paper, can help tutors in training to feel a lot more confident and sure about the outcome of what they do or what they can potentially do.
Well, I'd like to say something. I like your piece very much, Timoteo. Thank you. And one of the things that, well, there are many things that resonate with my experience. The issue of space, and just for the record, we don't have cookies. What's the other C? The couch. We have chair, but because it's a small room, the social distance is affected. So we are still online and do our sessions online because it's more practical. São Paulo is a very huge city, so the traffic is a problem every day, all the time. So because of our conditions. But I do see this idea of the space and people coming and you are sharing things and the beginning, because you are there is this identity part which I totally agree, but I would like to explore a little bit this start, which I think everybody has worked as a writing center, has lived, and there are many similarities. And the point is to show to people that you are important, that not you, but the center, what we're trying to construct. And I talk to people who, wherever I go, just to see if what I lived, some people lived as well at some level, and it is the same stories, because sometimes we think the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, and actually we are facing the same problems. So they start is like this. One tutor, I start the writing center, me, and then a student, and then my partner, like 2-3 people, and dealing constantly with and building. Because people have to be interested in writing. People have to like it. And then to decide to engage in this tutoring education process, which involves building confidence, and it takes time. This is something that I tell the students, my students, and this is something we are working on, not perfectly, and we have to improve, but a lot of hands-on work. A lot of things, discussions in WhatsApp, or this happened to me, I'm sharing an experience here with you. You're going to a webinar, let's share this with people. I'm going to a conference, this is look, this genre, I've never seen it. How about we explore this? Because we need to know about these things, minimally for the students. Oh, but I don't know, we teach a lot courses for very specific disciplines, math, dentistry. Well, we don't know math. We know English, and also we are ESL speakers. But okay, I see this being humble. Well, this is something I know, and there is a limit for me to know, because I'm not going to study math. This is not my area. But I can partner with the specialists, and let's see what we do, and be frank and honest to the tutor, to the tutee. Well, this is how I see. This is so well, through my experience, actually, being a tutee, and also being a tutor. So this is something that you build gradually, and allow you the perspective of not knowing everything. And I think it leaves out, at least for me, a lot of the burden, because that's something that happens with EAP teachers and tutors. And but I'm dealing with the students in areas that are very different from mine. But so I think what you described, what you reported, is very related to our experiences here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. And what you mentioned about not knowing everything was something that the director, Anita Muchoyan, she really emphasized on. And that gave me a lot of confidence with that first step and with the essay, what I mentioned in the essay.
Yeah, and then I guess there's a question coming in. Let's see.
So do I consider that if the fact that I don't have English as a first language to help me, or as I have to do extra work to analyze lectures in a foreign language? In my case, is slightly different. I would say that my English, I'm even more fluent in English than I am in Portuguese, especially academically, because my family moved to Lebanon in 2012. So I had quite a lot of experience being exposed to English. Definitely, there is a barrier, as I suggested. Sometimes with the accent, people tell me, "Oh, I have a very funny accent." It's hard to pin it down. But I would say in general, as an ESL speaker, it becomes a bridge, especially in places like Haigazian in Lebanon, where I'm meeting and dealing on a daily basis with ESL speakers, and even regardless of the place you are around the world, I think ESL speakers have nearly doubled. I'm not sure about the numbers, but they're much greater than the native speakers these days, and that comes across as an advantage, with especially because that helps me understand sometimes the logic behind it, the logic that some of the students some of the tutees would follow in going through a paper, and I would think, okay, yes, like I relate to trying to use the logic of a different language with the writing process. It's interesting, really.
Well, thank you so much for your reading and for your insight, and also for your support to tutors that are experiencing a lot of the same kinds of things that you have, or might be in similar settings and starting up a new community of writers. Thank you so much to Matteo. We really appreciate it. We're going to be moving into the last part of our reading. So I wanted to see if Morella, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your own experiences from those chronicled from the readers, or if anybody in the audience would like to ask any final questions about how their writing centers have facilitated community or voice or access, for tutors or tutees that either you know or that you've worked with before. So I'll open up the floor for about the last 5 minutes before we wrap up.
I'll just wait. Maybe people were the first, and then I will make some comments later. Let's wait if the audience has questions.
While we're waiting for people to put any comments in, I just wanted to say that we encourage everyone to use these pieces in their writing centers and in their trainings. As Tim was speaking, I was imagining someone giving Tim's piece to their own first writing tutor in their brand new center, and talking with him about tracking your experience as a new tutor in a new center over time. So we also want all these pieces to have a practical use. You can use these in your trainings and with your tutees and tutors.
Well, I think what I would, I commented each piece, so I would just wrap up. I think that's a good point, Max. Definitely, we are going to use these pieces in our sessions with students in different ways. There is much potential to explore this book, definitely, and we are looking forward to the second volume. If I understood, you're going to have that, or trying to have that. And I will just use keywords again. I think the pieces portrayed here today address very important things in the work of the Writing Center, and dealing with tutors, tutees, which is voice. because I am a writing instructor. I have this writing center, but I also teach undergraduate students and graduate students to write in English. And we see a lot, it seems that this voice is missing, even in the assignments that students have to take to prepare. And so, so voice is very needed. It's a very transformational potential. Tutor education, I think it was very emphasized, very portrayed by Timothy's piece, which is necessary, and the hurdles that it involves, and transformation. And so writing or literacy more generally, and writing centers are places for all this, not only to help students address the pressure of publish and perish, that usually graduate students all over the world are facing, but also writing as something as personal development, not necessarily for grade, as we say. Well, there is always the grade, there is always the essay. I don't know how many essays students have to write, but that's part of college life. But also see this as potential for development, personal development, and I think it was very clear here with this book launch. I'm very glad that we did this. Thank you all for preparing this and letting us host it, and really made our event even brighter, our year of celebration.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful that you've, you know, embraced these personal stories, and you know, we hope that we continue to share these stories with each other, with our friends, with other writing centers, and you know, to keep writing your story and sharing it. That's really just so important for allowing us to kind of see inside what makes things happen. Oh, you're on mute, Marilla.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. And just administrative stuff, to remind you that there is a link that you should fill out to receive your certificate if you need one, especially in here Brazilian context. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much
Thank you, everybody.
for everybody being here today, sharing with us. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.